Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jocular Junction. My name is Jordan with silent PH in the middle, and this is our good friend Sir Lucian over at Sir Lucian Gaming, who was part of the Saturday morning D&D show back in the day, and is now like, hey, let's hang out. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So he's hanging out today. We're gonna chat. It's a blast from the past. We're gonna catch up with Lucian. We're gonna just talk about D&D news. It's gonna be all of the fun. So first of all, Lucian, hi. How are you?
Hello. Welcome back. Yeah, I've been gone a little bit. Had a busy kind of year, just real life stuff, camping and traveling. And I think it was you get after COVID and then everything kind of seems like it's back to normal. And we still hadn't really done a lot, but we felt like now was time to get out and do some traveling. Me and my wife are a little bit older, so we're in that phase of our life that I think all the older people ever always get to, is that, hey, let's do some more traveling. Let's go see some more stuff. Let's go do this kind of thing. So I think that's kind of where we were at. And it's like, I wanted to get out there, and I did a ton of camping, which was great. But then we overdid it. So then we'd be like, okay, now we got to correct again. We got to have just the right amount. So
yeah.
But still gaming all the time, still talking with Jordan quite a bit off screen. I know you've been running your games, and I know you and Lex have been doing a lot of stuff, and so
yeah,
pretty cool. But hey, this is the show that we were just talking in our game on Thursday was our last game. We'll get to it, but we were trying to remember when everything had started and when we had met people, because I met my dungeon master, Danimal DM, through being a fan of the show, and we were talking. I was like, yeah, I was back in about 2017 that I really got back into Dungeons & Dragons. Jordan's channel is really doing all his stuff in Dungeons & Dragons. He's big into it. Like, he's going crazy into Dungeons & Dragons. We get together and we say, hey, let's do a show. And it's been that long that we're doing this show, and we start to meet all these people that we're playing games with and we're still doing stuff with. And I was just like, it was a nice memory blast to think about those years back, how it all started. We were playing like 2 or 3 games in a week because we couldn't get enough, right? We were just playing so much, and we were DMing so much, and we had so many ideas. We still have them, but it was just real
well, me especially, I had less responsibilities, so it was just like, let's run all of the games, and then I want to say at least once a month, but probably more, I would play in an online game of some kind. Like some friend would be like, hey, we're gonna do this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll play. And then writing, and like, I don't know, it's fun. Podcasting, doing all kinds of stuff. Still doing it, here or there. Yeah, the channel's slowed down a little bit since I've been a dad and got a new job and stuff. But like, as I was telling Lucian today, I recorded 3 videos. 2 of them are edited, and I've got another one that I scheduled to record today. So, and I have my like whole setup, and so I need to do it while the setup's up, because that's half the battle, is clearing off the table and getting the camera set and everything else. I'm like, I just need to do this. But
I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed kind of too, like, we hit right about the time that I feel like tabletop RPG is really rising, really going through the roof, to the point we have so much stuff we can talk about in our show notes, and so many games are getting done, and there's so many Kickstarters we couldn't even talk about them. We get all the way through COVID. It's still going pretty hard. And then a lot of people, COVID hits, they can't go anywhere. So I think just a lot of people just get even more creative because they're just sitting at home. So even more stuff kind of hits. And then just after that, those Kickstarters. But now I feel like we hit 2024. So we're a couple of years past it, really. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the Kickstarters aren't quite as much as we had, say, 2 years ago. There's not, there's still a lot of ttrpgs out there and stuff. But I feel like we hit a crest there. And I don't know if we're plateaued and we're heading down yet, or if we're just plateaued. But it seems like when I was looking through Kickstarter, some of the new games coming out, I didn't see as many choices or as many different things happening like we did, say, 2 years ago. I don't know if you noticed.
No, I don't know. It's a catch-22 where I'm like, I don't know if it's actually just like interest is waning, but definitely because people were trapped in their houses with COVID. The rise of online stuff was like, oh, we can play online. And I think that was Wizards of the Coast big, like they buying D&D Beyond from Fandom was a huge investment. And I don't know if that many people are that eager to play online, but at the same time, if you're trying to form a group finding like-minded people on the internet is going to be a lot easier than trying to find like-minded people in your community, just because the internet has that many more billions of people that are willing to play games with you. So it's probably a safe bet. But I'm really curious because I agree with Bob Worldbuilder, where he was saying that Stranger Things really impacted the craze of Dungeons and Dragons. And, we do see that, like, Stranger Things, D&D came out, and then Stranger Things, and then it shot up a big interest, and then season 2 and 3 and more interest shot up. So this final season coming out, I think that's going to be the big, like, I think we'll see another resurgence, and then after that's done, we'll see if it hangs on to that kind of a thing. But also with Kickstarters, a year ago or 2 years ago, Wizards announced the 2024 D&D, and so everyone's like not making content right now.
Right.
Like, there's not a lot of 5e. There are some 5e Kickstarters, but a lot of
they're
them are
probably
just
waiting
like
to see the rules. And,
they're like, we have the rules, but I still don't think we have an SRD, and they might be waiting till everything's out before they do that. But it's going to be a year before we start seeing a plethora of 5e Kickstarters. That being said, I feel like, every week I feel like I'm talking about some new Kickstarter that's going on. And there are like lots of crowdfunding is now the norm to make your like tabletop RPG product, I feel. And maybe that's just board gamey product in general. But like, so.
Yeah, and it made me think. I was at Gen Con this last year, and the one thing that I remember the most about walking through the hall again, I saw more board games and card games, and I didn't see as many new tabletop role-playing games. Still supplements, still the main people still put stuff out. Mony Cook still their stuff. Modifius having their huge booth. All those ones that are normally doing stuff, they have theirs, and they might have their one new book that's out for that year. But it wasn't like there was a lot of other just random tabletop role-playing games. It was packed with lots of board games and lots of card games and lots of the tabletop war game stuff, too. There was a bunch of that stuff that I saw. It just felt like it was more, whereas the couple years we went before that, you would see more of those smaller booths like, hey, come see our random tabletop mid-fantasy game, high fantasy game, sci-fi game, whatever it was that you just never heard of, so...
Yeah, well, and who knows? We'll see. I mean, the indie press revolution, they're always keen on making like short little RPGs. But again, I haven't heard a lot of them doing anything lately. But the turning point is going to be Stranger Things, and then how well Daggerheart does. And I will be unable to go to PAX Unplugged, which I'm really sad about. But there is going to be a big Daggerheart panel with Matt Mercer there. And so they're going to talk about the mechanics of Daggerheart. So that, coupled with Draw Steel from MCDM.
Which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and I guess more so Critical Role. They have a far bigger audience than Coville does. Not necessarily in our sphere, I think, because I really I'm like, oh, they're both building a game, but like I forget that, friggin' Critical Role is selling out like gazillion seat stadiums to have people watching them play D&D. But those being, it really is like, are you going to be more open than 5th edition D&D, or is it just more popular? Like, that's the other thing. Like, who knows? Because if those games are just popular, they might have the most restrictive fan content policy ever. But then people will just make stuff and put it out there for free because like it's popular and people like want this. And so those are the two games that I'm really watching because they could pull a significant crowd away from 5th edition D&D, I think. Critical Role for the, hey, I love Critical Role, I love the world, I want to play in a game that's like catered to that world. And then the flip side is MCDM, where it's like, I like a combination of people who are angry at Wizards of the Coast and who want a more tactical experience. I think those people are like, I don't necessarily want to play Pathfinder, but I want to try this one out. So who knows?
Yeah. It's funny too, because I I had just seen on Amazon they were talking about the third season of Vox Machina, the animated show. So I had decided like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I forget what it was, I'm gonna rewatch seasons 1 and 2. So I just rewatched seasons 1 and 2, and then I thought, well, I've had time on my hands these last couple of weeks or so. I've caught up on the last 2 episodes of Critical Role. So I've actually watched Critical Role in the last 2 weeks, which I totally fell off of, a long time ago. Back when I just actually watched them play in the last 2 weeks. It was really fun because they brought their 2 groups together. They brought the Mighty Nine to meet the Campaign 3 group, and they're at the table with all of their characters talking to each other, and that's been the big buzz that's going around. And it is funny to me because I always thought, too, I agree that Stranger Things was the thing that said, or put stuff in people's minds and be like, hey, D&D did sound kind of fun. I wonder if people are still doing that. And then I think what they did is they went and tried to find it, and that's when they found the Critical Roles, the Dimension 20s, the ACK Inks, all the games that are being run on Geek and Sundry and all that stuff. They stumble on them like, oh, there is a community out there. There are people doing this. And then if they really like it, they stuck with it, become fans of one of those shows, and they just kept going. And now there's just, so many podcasts that you can find out there, or shows that run, and all people that run really good games. I think I can't wait for this next season of
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, because it was like I always rewatch the whole season again before the next one drops, so I go through it again. I'm excited, but that's catching up. So.
And I think you're right. I think it's that thing that people always knew existed, and then they see this and they're just like, oh, like, I don't know, I never did try that, or I always kind of wanted to try that, or like, remember when we played that when we were 12? I wonder if it's still fun. And surprise, it is still fun.
Yeah, so. And did you see that Deborah Ann Wall? She's doing a video with John Berthenol.
Yeah.
And she does that really thing because he's an actor. He's a guy not into the scene at all, but he's
just
heard she does it.
I think.
And she's like, "Well, do you want to play it right now?" And I'm like, "That was the coolest kind of short little 10-minute. Well, let me show you what it is." And you could see him getting interested. You could see him kind of diving into it, even with just that little bit of time. The way she just strung him along. Well, what do you do? Well, what do I have? Yeah. Well, I don't know. What do you have? He's like, I need this.
Like, I don't know. You got like a bow or something, and they're like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, you're like putting the pieces together, and it's really fun.
That's the amazing thing. That's the part that brings me back, and always brings me back to wanting to role play, wanting even to do our show like this, to help other people gain that first time of, oh my God, this imagination game that we're playing is so cool.
Yeah. It's so. Lucian doesn't know this, but the rest of the people know this. Like, my old group that I used to play with, the DM moved away, and everybody kind of like fizzled out, and so I haven't played with those guys in a long time because trying to pick up the pieces, it was just like we were like driving an hour and a half, 2 hours to go play, but like it was causing too many problems, and nobody wanted to play online, so the whole thing kind of fizzled out. And that group was very role play, Critical Role inspired. Like, well, no, we all pick a voice for our character. We very much like heavy on role play. And then I picked up a bunch of my theater friends, and we're running this Planegea, very little role play. Like, a lot of people are just like, I think my character would react like this, and they don't react like that. They just tell me like, this is what my character reacts, or like, I would like my character to do this. And they kind of operate it like a video game. And I was like, but you're theater people. I would think that they would be heavy into the role play, but they're very casual on this. And a lot of them are very like, they like the strategy of it. So they love it when I bring out minis and terrain and things like that. And I think it's just like different people do different things. And then my DCC group, they're all over the place. Like, some of them are really quiet, and some of them are very like boastful and things like that. But it's interesting how you can have very different experiences with just different people,
same game. Same game can be so like, different.
Yeah. There's all well, in that case it was 5th edition D&D and 5th edition D&D. So have you picked up the new edition of D&D? Have you read through it? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I know it's got sent out to a lot of people. I know you can get it in probably electronic form at the moment. I'm waiting for the books to go to the shelves.
Like, the PHB is on shelves, so you can go get it now.
I thought it was coming out on the 29th.
I don't think so. I think it's out.
I'll have to go look for it. Yeah, I was waiting for the books to come out on shelf because I go down to my brick and mortar, I buy them, and then I was going to read through them. I've been hearing a lot of the stuff. I've been watching the videos on the Dungeons & Dragons channel where they've been talking about some of the rule changes and some of the things they've done, and it all sounds really cool. It all sounds like a tightened up, more fun version, but still 5e strong. Still, it doesn't feel to me like it's, no, you guys really should call this 6e because of all the things you've changed. And I don't know if I'm at that. It's a 5.5. I mean, maybe that's where people land on.
We're all trying to figure out what to call it. Yeah. And I think we won't know until. Yeah. And I think we won't know until it gets a little bigger and we go to when I start organizing games. Because right now I organize games and I think a lot of people are like, hey, I want to play D&D. And my friends are usually like, oh, well, we're all playing 5e because that's the books they have, that's the books I have, blah, blah, blah. But then moving forward, it's going to be, well, are we going to play that new version of 5e or this one? And Wizards of the Coast definitely thought it was just like an upgrade, like you just switch over and start playing, which was the big backlash on D&D Beyond, where people are like, but I don't want the new rules. I want to play what I bought on D&D Beyond. And they had to like rewrite all of their stuff to make it so that you have your original stuff as well as the new stuff that you bought. Kind of interesting. Some of the spells and stuff, I definitely will like, I'm going to take that new ruling over the old ruling, like 100%, like True Strike, things like that. That's just great improvement. But a lot of it, I'm like, I don't even know. And then I always think of the casual player. A guy at my table loves D&D. We talk about D&D all the time. And he leveled up the other day in my Planegea game and said, like, I've never really, what are feats? Like, should I look at feats? What are those? And I'm like, you've never even played with feats? Like, what is happening?
Your world is about to be opened.
Like, it blew my mind. And I'm like, I was like, guys, we should switch over to the new version of D&D because I want to try it out. And after that, I was like, I don't think I should. Like, this is adding a level of complexity that you guys are not ready for. You're like, ready. What's a feat? I'm like, oh my God. 2024 D&D is nothing but feats. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But
I do feel like as I was reading... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of that, the DMG 2024 is coming out on D&D Beyond on October 29th. They've been doing a lot of promotional videos on it. I've talked about it here before, but with the bastions and magic item crafting, I'm really curious to read the rules because it doesn't feel... I've always feel like everybody wants to craft in a tabletop RPG, but like cool. We never really have a good way of doing it. Because ultimately, if you're going to put all that work into it, then it should just be a lot of work you put into getting the item as opposed to getting the crafting material or something like that. It's always kind of weird. But the physical book should be in stores on the 12th. And then we have to wait for the monster manual until February, I believe. Yeah.
Well, my big question from the DMG for you has been, have you done, or how many videos have you done? They've changed the main campaign to be Greyhawk. Well, so they're going to talk about more Greyhawk in the DMG, which I think I love that campaign. So are we going to see Greyhawk campaign videos from Jordan?
Yes. So I've written a couple and I've been reading. I have an old, I have all the PDFs because I went on a big buying spree. But but I have, I was reading Living Greyhawk, which was a big thing in the 2000s with 3rd edition, where it was Greyhawk was being changed as people were playing in different areas of the country. And it was really interesting. It's not ran by Wizards of the Coast, but it was like they were allowed to use Greyhawk and influence its story. And Wizards of the Coast was like, yeah, that's okay. And so I don't know. It was really an interesting time and how things changed. I will be covering Greyhawk. I don't think Greyhawk is going to be the default campaign setting because the more I hear about it, I think Greyhawk is just how Gary Gygax made Greyhawk will be pertainable to you as a dungeon master on making your own setting. Like, start with a castle, start with a dungeon, and then if your players want to go over that mountain, let them go over that mountain. And then they can go over the mountain and they can talk to stuff and people like that. And so a lot of this stuff is interesting because of that. My kiddos running back and forth. And so I like that. I like Greyhawk as an explanation for that, where you can say, you know, hey,
it's an example.
Yeah, an example. Thank you. Where he started with this, and then it's like his players were like, well, we want to go over here. Oh, well, then I'll turn Castle Greyhawk into a castle. And then, I'll put a city next by, and I don't know, there's a big kingdom over there, and now I've got a continent and a desert. Like, he just kept building as his players wanted to explore. And I think that is awesome. And so to say, like, here we have, like, to say that they're switching over to Greyhawk, I don't think that's happening at all, especially when we know that there is a huge 2-bundle Forgotten Realms supplement coming out at the end of next year. Which will have, like, here's Forgotten Realms for the Dungeon Master and here's Forgotten Realms for the player. I think that is going to still be the default setting. And if they don't make a Forgotten Realms material, I heard a rumor that Ed Greenwood gets all of the stuff back. Like, part of the contract is that Wizards has to make a new, like, Forgotten Realms something, and if they ever stop, the rights revert back over to him, and so it's like they'll never stop because they're so invested.
Yeah, that's such a weird
and they don't want to give it back to Ed Greenwood.
It does feel too like I've been reading a lot about it, and I have a lot of the old stuff. They have brought a lot of Greyhawk version adventures into Forgotten Realms or some of the books they put out, and you know, like when you were playing Saltmarsh and you were playing, you know, a lot of that stuff was coming from some of the Greyhawk campaign stuff too, that just got put into the Forgotten Realms. I was always thinking that was that 70s, 80s, not quite 90s, but maybe it was 90s, where they still were leaning into the campaign world is yours as the dungeon master. Greyhawk was there, like, pretty much as an example of how Gary did it and how others could do it, but it was more like they still encouraged you to be your own dungeon master and have your own world, and it was still more on that. And I feel like Forgotten Realms came around when more novels were getting written. Ed becomes a lot more popular, Forgotten Realms, and you know, you get the Dales and you get the Sword Coast, and that was more of like, here's a shift to, you can play in our canon world, and here's all the books you could ever want to play in our canon world. But I never got the impression they wanted us to make Forgotten Realms our Forgotten Realms, as much as I felt like that message was heard with the Greyhawk world. Yeah, I think it was still there, but I don't think it was as loud or as prominent as it was. And I'm wondering if they're going to do a switch back to, or we've talked about this in many shows. I've always wondered what if they finally allowed Chris Perkins, who's now going to be the architect, or he was the architect, and now he's no longer director.
Yeah, he's no longer he's becoming a creative director. So it kind of goes into the only piece of news that we really have today is that in a random interview, he said that he's stepping down as the book lead, which is like the person who, you know, I'm going to give you Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and then you're like the person and you control
all of... I feel
like
an editor, right?
Not an editor so much as like it is his design from what I'm getting. But like you hire out all these little writers to come and write supplements and stuff for you, and then he kind of puzzle pieces them together, so he has the overarching idea. But he said that he's no longer the DMG 2024 and the starter set are going to be his last like book lead things, and after that he's evolving into a new role called creative director, where he's kind of overseeing the brand as a whole, I think. Maybe not as a whole, but like on the gaming side. But a lot of people were like, is he leaving? Is he stepping down? Like, what's happening? I'm like, I don't know. And I even said it here because it was just very vague. And we're like, why did he say that without like putting out more information? But
yeah.
So,
well, and where I was going with that is like, I was always wondered, we've had Forgotten Realms, which came from 90s, 2000s, Ed Greenwood and all the people that have contributed to that. We had Greyhawk, which was Gary's and everybody else's that contributed to that during the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And now I was wondering, do we finally maybe we get a Chris Perkins, you know, and that team get their next step, and now what's the next one? What's the next group where we say, okay, whole new world, whole new thing, whole new ball and game. Each one of those guys got their chance. Do they get their chance? Does Chris Perkins get his chance to say from scratch, here's my fantasy world of what Dungeons & Dragons is. I always wonder what that would be like too, because I mean, the team they've got right now is a really good storytelling team. I love the books they've been putting out, and I love the stuff they've been giving us. So to give that team a chance, not just to take old material or add to the old material, but can they create new material that's never been created?
Yeah, and sadly, I don't think that they'll do that. Like,
that's the pipe dream of Lucian.
I think, you know, and I actually learned that a lot of Eberron is also Chris Perkins. I didn't realize this until recently, but like he worked heavily on that setting with Keith Baker, and so I think that's another reason that setting shines. But they are well entrenched in their intellectual property and don't really have any plans on making new stuff, from what I can tell.
Yeah, so that's such a shame. Yeah, such a shame, because imagine what he could do if
I just need him to retire, and then he'll like be like, hey, surprise, I made this amazing setting, you know.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, so I ended up picking up Tolis from Mony Cook Games, and that's another thing where I'm like, this is the most amazing setting.
This
like,
book is so good.
It's so good, and it's so detailed, and it is one of those things where I'm like, if Mony Cook could just sit down and make a setting, and he did, and it was just a great D&D setting, and it's the D&D setting that he played back in the TSR days for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And Chris Perkins and Bruce Cordell were like his players. And like he's like, I couldn't have asked for like a better group of D&D players to come up with this really amazing campaign setting. And so I'm waiting for
we need Chris to leave.
Yeah, I need him to retire, and then he'll go to a cabin in the woods and just start writing. And like once every 2 years, we'll get a book that comes out, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been like slowly writing this for the last like 15 years of my life, and we'll be like, what? And
he's still doing Eberron, so he's still throwing out tons of stuff too. So same thing.
He's starting a new setting, so
he wants his. I bet one that he totally controls, not going to give up to anybody. It's going to be his. Yeah.
He made a Frontiers of Eberron, and he said that this is going to be my last Eberron book for a while. I'm sure Wizards will pull him back in when they make an Eberron book official, but like, standalone Keith book. That's going to be his last one, and he hinted that he's like, I've got a new setting, I want to control it, I want to have it be mine. So I'm very excited to see where that goes. So, well,
we've talked a bunch of D&D. We should put a little Paizo in there, right?
Go ahead,
at least a tiny bit. That's
so
what we used
those
to
of
do
you
on
who
this
knew,
show.
Lucian used to give the Paizo report back on the Saturday morning RPG show.
Yeah.
So what's going on with Paizo? Because I don't follow Paizo very well at all.
Yeah, Pathfinder 2 Second Edition is really good, and I've read through it, and I think it's a strong system, even though I'm still playing lots of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. But what I took a look at is they do have a new book coming out, War of the Immortals, coming out on October 3rd. There's a lot of releases happening right here at the end of October. Makes sense because the Christmas season's coming up. Yep, there you go. Got to sell them books for Christmas. A god has been slain, the world gets thrown into turmoil, and it has two new classes, the Animist and the Exemplar. The Animist sounds like it has a way to control or conjure spirits or work with spirits in the world, and then the Exemplar, apparently when this god was killed, I think the blood of the god rains down on the world, and if you got touched by that piece of blood, or you get like a speck of divinity, and that's where the Exemplar class, I think, comes from. And they do have a novel that's talking about it a little bit too. You don't get a lot of Pathfinder novels out there, but there's a novel coming out. So that's for Pathfinder 2E, so they're running with that, which seems cool. I always like new classes, always like new feats and new backgrounds and the new story line of where it's going. It sounds like a big upheaval of that world. And then Starfinder, which is the other game that they're really pushing. They're still in their playtest at the moment, so they haven't quite got to their what I'm thinking is 2E for Starfinder. You can buy this playtest, which I thought was interesting. It's like looks like a normal book that they would put out for Starfinder, but they call it
They did that for Pathfinder 2A too. Like it was Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest, and that was my first Gen Con. And I remember people were $39.99
or something.
People were waiting in line to get the actual playtest book, and I was like, and you know, a lot of it probably won't change. And if you're a collector, and I don't know, at this point, it's kind of like, why not? I guess like sell your playtest, but it just feels weird. But it has art and stuff. It's like a finished book. It doesn't look,
and I think we can always take and steal things and put it in our game, no matter what it is. So like, you could take the inspiration, you could take the stuff and put it in whatever the actual game turns out to be. I'm interested because I've always wanted a good sci-fi game that was really close to 5e in a way that I thought would be easier to learn. So I'm kind of excited, but I'm still waiting for the full release to get like, I've done some playtests and I put in some information, but I don't know if I'll buy this one. But it is the Worlds Devoured is their playtest 2e that's coming out also on October 30th. You should be able to find that on the shelves if you want to. And then they have a way for you to give your comment and feedback on go through the whole playtest and then help them form the game of Starfinder 2e. So they're big into that.
I have a question for you. You played Starfinder, correct? Like original?
One session.
Oh, okay. Do you think Starfinder and Pathfinder can mix and match, much like Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics can? Like,
No.
if I really want to, the game fundamentally is the same if I play a mutant or a wizard. The mutant just has, like, different mutant abilities, but it's like you kind of have, like, the similar tables and stuff. Do you think you can... Because I feel like I can mix and match those really easy, but...
Everybody listening, if you're an expert on this, you can put in chat if I'm complete. The way I understood it, Starfinder was a heavily modified Pathfinder. So it was almost like trying to play Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, but you were also going to try to have advanced Dungeons and Dragons in it. There was a fundamental change, and enough of a change that it didn't feel like they would mix together very well. I didn't feel like, because I read the Pathfinder rules, which made sense to me and were very D&D like. Starfinder was still hard to figure out. It was different enough.
This is based off of Pathfinder 1.
It wasn't the same. I played Mutant Crawl Classics and DCC. Those go together like peanut butter and chocolate. So that's nothing. So that's a much better, you can use those both interchangeably. Or if you really want an interchangeable fantasy sci-fi, I mean, Mony Cook, I always felt like has the
Cypher.
The Cypher system is just so good at that.
Because you can just be like, I'm going to pull I ended up buying both the core Cypher book from a Kickstarter, but I have the Gods Forsaken, I think, is the fantasy version.
Yep.
And so, I have the fantasy stuff, and then I also have the Newman Era, and you could like totally like, I want to go a more cybernetic route, or I want to go this route. So it kind of depends on the world you're creating, I suppose.
And then to add on to that, I think Pathfinder 2e and Starfinder 2e are going to be closer aligned.
Yeah.
So I think there will be more synergy there than you would have if you said, I picked up a bunch of Pathfinder books and I picked up a bunch of Starfinder books.
Yeah.
And I think you have to do a lot of hand manipulation if you want those to work.
Maybe
but,
it's like,
we're used to that.
Yeah, maybe it's like 5e 2014 and 5e 2024 where like I made a whole video where I'm just like, I think the adventures are backwards compatible, and I think you could play with a 2014 rogue in a 2024 like with 2024 characters, but then when you're like, I want this feat, or I want, going back and forth, I was like, that doesn't seem to work very well. And basically I was like, I think adventures and monsters are backwards compatible. I think the rest of it, you have to put in a lot of work to make it work, but you can.
You have to put some conversion in.
And then my whole point was, a lot of people had backlash on the video, but I was like, my whole point was that if I'm going to put in that much work, I want to do it with a system that's like OSR adjacent, I feel.
Which
where I'm
done,
like,
right?
why am I trying to do all of this? Like when I could just easily do this, or more easily do this in another setting. So, or another game system. So
I'm excited. When it finally comes out, I'll definitely buy it and get into it. I'm a sucker for like a really good sci-fi setting anyways, and so I buy all those books as they come out. So I'm hoping it comes out, because I don't see any other. I mean, maybe Star Trek Adventures is one of my favorites from Modiphius to put up there as a great sci-fi setting with a great system behind it to play and run for your players. But I think Starfinder is like gotta be the top of the game, whereas fantasy-wise, you'd say Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, DCC, then maybe everybody else for fantasy. I don't think it's as defined like that on the sci-fi side. I think it's still, there hasn't been somebody who's, I'm at the top of the hill of the sci-fi genre of that.
Yeah, I agree. Phoenix Guard in chat actually says the plan is for Starfinder 2e and Pathfinder 2e to be completely compatible with each other.
That's what I want to hear.
They said Starfinder 1e was actually based off of like a branch of original Pathfinder, but it was more popular than anticipated. So that's why they're like, oh, holy cow, like we should bring Starfinder first edition in line with our other products so that they are backwards compatible, so that you could hypothetically run a Pathfinder adventure using Starfinder or something. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think of like Stars Without Number is the only equivalent, because even I don't think you're getting the same experience with a Starfinder game that you are with a Mothership. You're definitely not. But with a Star Trek Adventures, like I think they're very different. And a Pathfinder game is kind of not Pathfinder, a Spelljammer game is kind of the equivalent on the D&D side, and you're not getting the same experience that you are with a Starfinder game. So,
and some people might be saying, well, what about all the Star Wars games? And I think that would have been normal had they stuck to one system, but the Star Wars jumped around to a lot of systems, so they never were able to like claim the top of the hill, because they were always, some other company was doing it in their version, and it was always switching and changing. And I'm always,
and I guess I'm also thinking of like not an existing property, because it's like, what I want to do a sci-fi game. I don't, me being like, I want to do a sci-fi game. Let's use the Star Wars rules. That has a very different feel, because then you're making a Star Wars game, But yeah, I mean, Mothership's great and stuff, and there's lots of fun. The Alien RPG is the same thing. I hear it's very, very good, but it's also like you're playing in a very particular universe. So,
and I think that system is good for that type of setting.
Yeah,
you wouldn't want to use the Alien rules to run a Star Trek game.
Correct. Yeah.
You just would, a Below Decks game, which I still think would be really good too. And that's
Lower Decks, yeah.
Or Lower Decks, yeah.
Yeah. New season just dropped. It's so good. It's so good. Man, yeah, lots of fun stuff. So, speaking of all these different games that are out, there's a couple of crowdfunding things that I always like to highlight. One of them is Mony Cook Games' The Darkest Woods. And normally I have this up on my screen, but with now I have Lucian's face there, so I'll just put a thing in the chat. You guys can click the link if you're interested. And of course, there will be links down below. But this is interesting to me because during the pandemic, Mony Cook Games came out with a book called The Darkest House. And The Darkest House is a book that he created because of a game campaign that he ran in his Invisible Sun game. So Invisible Sun, you actually build a house in a community as part of like the roleplay experience. You have like a base of operations that you live there. You have neighbors. And in that game, there was always the house that was the darkest house. And it always reminds me of like when you're a kid and you're just like, oh yeah, that's like the creepy old house or whatever.
Always the house. Yeah.
There's always that scary house that you're just like, yeah, we don't go there. So it's the darkest house. And I bought the darkest house, and it was really pretty imaginative and ahead of its time. So you could buy it digitally, and it was a web experience that came with audio files. So like if the phone rang in the world, you could play this audio file of a creepy British child voice at the other end asking for something. And it was really meant to be played over the internet so that you had like webcams and you're chatting and stuff. I think that's maybe how he was also playing it, like because of the pandemic, who knows? They're expanding that now into a product called The Darkest Woods, and it's going to have a similar vibe where there's an online aspect, but you can also get a print book. And I have the print book of The Darkest House, and it's amazing. Like it's a very complex point crawl, for lack of a better way to describe it, because it's you enter a room, that room might have one or two doors, and then depending on the exit you figure out, because every room's kind of a puzzle. You go from other things. And the goal of the module is like left up to you. It's like, is there something your players need that's inside the darkest house? Did they accidentally get in? Like their whole goal might be, how do I escape? Or the goal might be, we have to get to the heart of the darkest house to find, I don't know, the pencil of doom so that we can get out of the darkest house. But it's this house exists everywhere outside of time, outside of campaign settings. So the Darkest Wood is similar. It's going to be a forest that's super spooky and things like that. And then I think they have plans for making another thing called The Darkest Road, which is going to be another expansion that leads either to the darkest house or to the darkest woods. It's the darkest road. And I really, if you like spooky stuff, it's cool. And the art's amazing. Like really, really creative things. As with most Mony Cook games, things like, the art's always
everything. Good. Yeah. That makes me think of like Stephen King and the Dark Tower series.
Oh, yeah. In a way, that's like cool. The existing in all worlds kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So
I actually have not backed this because I need to slow down on my Kickstarters. And Mony Cook always gets a lot of my money, but it looks really, really cool. It's got 27 days left. They've already raised $175,000, and Mony Cook is very good at fulfilling their Kickstarters. And so you're going to be guaranteed a product. They're doing a really good job. So I would highly recommend that, only because I really, really enjoyed The Darkest House, which is I want to use kids on bikes and run that. I was trying to figure out a way of making like a more concise experience for Halloween, because when you read the book, you're like, this is like a year-long campaign of like navigating this scary house. Not just a session. Like it is way more than a session. So
what was the one they did before that? Was that the Old Gods of Appalachia? Was that the book that came before the Dark? Yeah. He's been doing some really interesting outside of the normal box of tabletop role-playing games and exploring some of those other kind of cool genres, I think, to making new genres.
Yeah. The Old Gods of Appalachia was a podcast, and they're using their Cypher system to make a version of it. And that's actually one I have not read, but I hear good things. They did an Invisible Sun Kickstarter to do a reprint, and that reprint came with a new book. So I backed it to get that new book, which has not been fulfilled yet, but I'm excited for that. And then this is their latest one. But yeah, that's the business now is making crowdfunding things for your next project. So the next Kickstarter that I have is a 5e book called The Widow's Web. It's Trials of the Drow. So this is a campaign module. Oh, and they're at 63,000. They're doing pretty good.
It's about Drow, of course. Jordan
well, so the company, the authors reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, we're doing this really cool thing. Do you want to review it?" And I was like, "I guess." Like, I can't guarantee a review, kind of a thing. They were kind of like I think they didn't know that they were like, "Hey, we want to like buy some advertisements," but they didn't really know, and it was back and forth. But it's cool enough that I wanted to talk about it here. I didn't want to just like drop it entirely. Because I love the Drow, and this is a fun like adventure. They're gonna have some cool maps and stuff. It kind of feels like a Beetle and Grimm product in that you're getting the adventure with like maps and cards and handouts and things like that. It's not Beetle and Grimm, but yeah, and like you get to play evil. So if you want to be an evil Drow, this module is kind of there to help you. Like, if you guys want to be evil, you can be successful in being evil. And I thought that was kind of cool because not a lot of games allow you to do that. And if you're going to be evil, then a Lolth Drow kind of thing sounds like a good way to be evil. So it's called, The Widow's Web, Trials of the Drow. It's on Kickstarter right now. I don't know. This might be their first created. So this is their first Kickstarter. So, take that with a grain of salt, because I've been burned on Kickstarters before. And I don't know, but like they seem like most of it is already done. And it's got labeled as a Project We Love Kickstarter, so that's cool. Out of Sacramento.
I'm sure everybody remembers, but that Jordan has always wanted a group of players to tell him, yes, can we play an all Drow campaign? We're excited. Can we play it now?
And I feel bad because Moa Peach has always been in chat hassling me about that Drow Patreon game. And yep, there he is. Drow Patreon. Yep.
Everybody take a drink.
And I need to do that. We just have not done it. But yeah, I got most of that campaign. Like, I got at least the beginning and the first like 4 sessions kind of mapped out, and I should go back to that. That would be really fun.
Yeah, it's always. I can tell it's an idea that burns into your head to the point where you'll never let it go. There's always somewhere, sometime in this future, you will do it. It's like when we talk about, for me, like the cliff or the We still haven't really named it, but it's like this setting that's burned into my head that will never go away.
Yep.
About this endless cliff that only goes down. You never know what's down there. You don't know how I got there. And the adventure's all vertical about how far do you go down and what do you find when you do it. And I'm just like, the imagination of that, it just hits me sometimes in dreams or at night when I'm just thinking. I'm on a car drive and I've got an hour or wherever I'm going. I just start
those are the best times to start thinking about. You're like,
very cool.
Very, very fun. This is just to kind of keep you guys updated. I was doing like individual Humble Bundle book bundles. Like, you should check out this, but there's so many right now that the affiliate link I have in the show notes just takes you to Humble Bundle's books. So if you are interested, there is a fantasy roleplay Warhammer going on, World of Darkness, Call of Cthulhu, and then, I guess that's the only books. There were more, but they've like fizzled out. But yeah, there's 3 right there that you can grab. So if you're interested in any of those, I think the only one I don't really know very well is fantasy roleplay for Warhammer. But like, people love Warhammer.
I'm an expert. That's our next campaign.
Spoiler is
for
it?
A little later in the show. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited about that. And then, go ahead.
The only one I put on there was the Broken Empires, and you may have seen this. I think of other people might have covered it. I've seen some other YouTube videos out there. But what caught my eye, because me and you always talk mechanics, D100 system. So we don't see a lot of those coming out these days, which really to us means percentage-based system. Open sandbox world, but that would be any kind of role-playing game for the most part. What I liked about it, freeform magic system, which sounds intriguing. They came up with a travel system, so as you're traveling from place to place, there's some type of mechanic going on within the game. Social intrigue mechanics, which we always say, I think D&D was something that they never really had very well, was the social mechanic aspect of playing the game. And then a possible solo variant rules where you could play some type of solo game too. So all those things combined kind of caught my eye about, this could be very interesting. No classes, skill-based system. We don't see a lot of those. We used to see a bunch of them back in the 80s, well, I'd say 90s, when everybody was trying to be different than Dungeons & Dragons. So they would stop doing the class-based and they'd go to the skill-based systems. But I don't think we see as many of those anymore. So I thought this would be interesting, a skill-based system that's coming out.
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. This is made by a YouTuber who calls himself Me, Myself, and Die. His name's Trevor. I don't know him personally, but if you start looking around on him, he's been popping up on a lot of friendly Dungeon Tuber channels. And he's been making videos since, I think, 2019. And then, but he's been running D&D and various tabletop RPGs. And it also says here he's a voice actor. So he's been working on a lot of stuff. And this is one of those things, kind of like, I don't want to say like Jordan, but he wanted to make the game he wants to play. And so he's like, I'm going to go ahead and make this game and I'm going to do all this stuff. And I thought that was really cool. So I have watched a couple of the videos. I know he did a video with Kelsey Dion and Dave Thalmovor, who does a lot of Dave reviews, games and stuff. And they talk about it's weird because it feels a little overly complex for me, but I think I would have to play it, where there's a lot of hit locations and then, now my arm is useless. And so a little more... No hit points, a little more focused than just I have hit points. And if I have 1 hit point, I can still do stuff. And it's well, no, because you your arm got broken or your leg is hurt or things like that. And then that system is also kind of overlaid with the social system we were talking, gamifying it a little bit. But he's big on the freeform magic, where it's I want to take a couple aspects of magic and craft it into something. So, we'll see. But this is, he's at $400,000. He's got 4 days to go. So yeah, if you're listening to this on, Monday, you have a day to go check this out. But it's doing really well. I think it'll be fun. I'm curious to see it. He's got really awesome art. It looks fun. So
I think we should reach out to him and see if he'd come on the show, because I feel like he might have stole something from me in Seeking Revenor. I'm looking at his travel thing, and in my Seeking Revenor campaign, which were games that were played with fans of this show, it was a West Marches style game. But when we were traveling from hex to hex, the thing I put in there was you had somebody who was the guide or the scout, the quartermaster. There was, and each person had a role that they would make. Mm-hmm. And depending on that role could define some of the things that might have happened but during the travel. So you might find a point of interest. You might actually have an encounter. You might, somebody who was supposed to be in charge of food might have messed up if you rolled bad. So when you got there, everybody had one level of exhaustion when they got there, because somebody didn't do their job right. So it was a bad roll. Yeah. If it was a good roll, you'd get there and you might have a boon of some sort where you're like, you guys are super energetic, so everybody gets plus, 5 temporary hit points for the rest of the session because the person that was supposed to do their job did their good job. And I had 4 of them, and the party who would get together would have to say who is each one of the 4 that is going to do this thing. So now I'm reading his thing, and it says each of the travel groups have a guide, a quartermaster, and a scout. The guide rolls determines how far they get before an event is triggered. The quartermaster's roll reveals how much fatigue the party would suffer. And then the scout roll tells you if an event is an opportunity or in a danger. So the scout would always, and that's what I did in my game, where the scout could be like, you could see a danger, but if you had a good roll, you might be able to avoid it, or you could go tackle it if you wanted to. So you had that choice. I was like, oh, and I'm sure he didn't steal it. I'm just joking, but yeah, it was like great minds thinking about it. Like, I want to talk to this guy now because we've had the same kind of ideas in our campaigns. That's very cool. So I might have to reach out to him and see him bring him on.
That exact system exists in Forbidden Lands. So like you have your like character and then you have your job. I was the quartermaster and I had to like make sure that we had all of these supplies and stuff. So it's a way of gamifying travel, and that's what
to make it more fun and more exciting.
Yeah. Because you can hand wave anything, but we don't hand wave combat because we find it interesting because it's a game within a game. Like I could easily say like 4 trolls show up and you guys all defeat them and we move on. But it's like, oh, and a lot of people do that with, and it's going to take you 8 months to travel here. And you do it. Cool. But like part of the fun is like, can we gamify this? And this kind of goes back to talking about the crafting systems in the DMG. I'm really curious about that because we all want crafting systems, but usually it's like, yeah, you craft it. That sounds cool. Like you have it. You have the thing you want. Like, what am I supposed to how do I gamify this? How do I make it fun? And so, I think it's...
Or like the freeform magic. That had me really intrigued because I thought, well, all right, Jordan, like we sit and talk about game mechanics all the time. How would we build a freeform magic system that people could use? So there's no spell slots. There's not magic points, which is kind of the other way you can go and lots of games go. But more of a freeform, how would you do that? How would you base it? I was just thinking, there's so many different ways you could go with that and figure out how to bring pieces together and then like weaving. Everybody always likes the idea of weaving something together. So you're taking little parts and that builds it into something that's my fireball, my version of a fireball or whatever it might be. So that's intriguing too.
I mean, Invisible Sun, the weavers specifically, you have aspects that you pull and weave together, and the higher level you get, the more you can weave things together. But they're very like intangible aspects. Like one of them is like, I don't know, the act of falling, or like the other one is like anger. And you're like, okay, I might combine anger and the act of falling to like, I want to pull a meteor down on someone's head. And so it's like, oh, okay. And then you do like an appropriate amount of damage based on the spell. But like, that's the kind of magic that I think of when I think of freeform. And for those of you who are fans of the show, you probably have heard of Modular G6, my playtesting RPG that I'm working on. But that is something similar where I want players to be able to take modules and combine them in new ways. So if I have the Arcane Fire module, then I can, pew pew, I can shoot fire kind of like a fire cantrip. But if I take the Burst module, I can combine that to make like a big wall of fire around me. And that's going to cost some extra points. So in a way, there's not spell slots, but you have a limited amount of like action points you can do in a combat. But it combines those two things into a big burst of fire. Kate, but then I also like the idea of, well, maybe I have a big axe and I want to use this burst module. Okay, well, you combine those two to create a big swing effect where you hit everybody in a circle. And I enjoy those too, but I also like specific spells. So anything that doesn't do damage, I decided in modular D6 to make it rote magic, which is like a teleport, you know, like a teleport on the ground, or what's the rope spell that you like climb up into the invisible thing up there? I forget what it's called.
Rope trick, right?
Rope trick. That's why did I not remember that? But like rope trick is like, hey, we studied this spell, we made it work really, really hard. It's not this is a very consistently magical thing that we have scientifically figured out. And you can learn that very consistent thing and make it work and do that. If that's what you're interested in. Otherwise, you can just, I'm going to combine wind and water and I don't know, like a big blast or a cone, and I'm gonna shoot a cone of cold at you, and that's what I'm gonna do by combining these three things.
Yeah, and my idea was similar to that, and you would use words that are describe just aspects, like you said. So an aspect on its own, if you just said it didn't do anything, but it was once you combine those aspects together. So if fire had a cool sounding word, and then you had like the range or something being thrown or going a distance was a word, and then an explosion at the end or something is a word. And so when the player would say, okay, it's your turn, what are you doing? They would get to, in role play a little bit, get to be able to say, I do this, and they say the words. And then it's tell the DM, oh yeah, in case you don't remember all the words, you're like, I did this spell that does this much damage that goes this far. But you get to say, like, you get to say it, you're like
kind of taking
like
the Latin equivalent of that and building a magic phrase. Like,
you could do it with runes, you could do it with the phrase, you could do it with a sing song. There's all kinds of different ways. I like also too with Mony Cook, he devised so many different ways to do magic in Invisible Sun that you had the one that's weaving, but then you could be a different type of spellcaster was totally different than weaving. It was like a totally different way to do it. So if you're looking for interesting ways to do magic different than spell slot, you might look into some of the Invisible Sun stuff, because he kind of come up with some different ways magic can appear in the game and gamify those things too to bring into your game.
Yep. And Ben Milton with Maze Rats and Knave has kind of similar open-ended spells. You kind of talk about you roll for random spells, but you roll two words, put it together, and then you get to talk to the DM and say, how do we do that? Phoenix Guard points out Epic Spell Wars, which is a card game that's very similar. You have like a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you're creating a spell that way. And it's very fun. Yeah. I love magic. It's awesome.
Gets the creative juices going. It's just like you can think of so many ways to do it, and it sounds so much fun to try it.
For sure. And then so finally we kind of talk about games that we played. Originally I titled this show when do you end a campaign? Because I'm in this position with Planegea where my players are like, we kind of want to try something new when this is over. It's almost over. But we also want to continue because they love Planegea and they want to keep playing in this world, and I could keep running stuff, I'm sure. But you said you had the final session of your Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which long-term listeners of the show know that you've been going through that for a long time. So what
5-year campaign? I've never been in any campaign.
That's amazing. So I'm more curious about that. How did this work out, and what did you do? So
we started with Dragon Heist, and we kept most of the same characters of the party, the storyline, Dragon Heist into Dungeon of the Mad Mage all the way through. And we went all the way through. We went all the way to the bottom. We fought Hallister. We just finished that up on Thursday, and we had to decide what to do. And we've always talked about spoilers with this one, so sorry if you guys are spoilers. But I can't think of too many people that go through a 1 to 20 level campaign and actually finish it, because most of us get to 9th or 10th level, and then we move on to the next campaign or the next party that we're with. But we went all the way through it, and it was a full-on dungeon crawl. It's a full-on, all floors have elements and themes to them that you can dive into. From a player standpoint, I was a player. From a player standpoint, we loved it because the group we had were very tactical. We had maps, we had miniatures. Our characters were super overpowered and over OP by the end, just because that's the way we were. We're power gamers. But our dungeon master was able to kind of keep it fun, keep it moving along, and we had a reason to be there the whole time. We in our game we worked for Acquisitions Incorporated, and they wanted us to map the entire dungeon of the Mad Mage. That was what we were given by Jerry. His character,
Omendron, yeah.
Omendron ordered us to go down there and do it, so that's what we did. So we went through that whole thing, but we had lots of cool adventures all the way through it. Some characters died. We had to bring new characters in. We got all the way to the highest level that you could get in your characters. So we all multi-class, so none of us were level 20 of a class. We were all like, I was level 7 fighter, arcane archer, and a level 13 cleric, Twilight. And it was like, but we were still super powerful characters. It was fun to play at that level. It was fun to fight against creatures that were CR 15, 17, 20, get into those ranges. To see spells that could kill you in one shot no matter how many hit points you have. So, super fun. Probably not for everybody. There's not a lot of people out there that will probably enjoy a 5-year-long campaign that's the same thing. I think a lot of us want to try different characters and try different themes, so we want to bounce around a little bit more. But I enjoyed it. And the cool thing about this is you should have Danimal on at some point. You just talked to him about it. He ran his home party through the same thing. So he ran 2 groups at the same time. We took a little bit longer.
Through the same dungeon.
Same dungeon, and all the different things that happened and all the different ways that the characters tackled things and the outcomes. It's really cool to listen to him talk about how one group did one thing and another group did another thing. And to just realize that even if you have an adventure, it can be totally different depending on what players you have that run through it. We loved it. We enjoyed it. I think our characters it's my favorite character I've ever played now. Khan was the name of my character. I'll remember this character forever now. And Eric Hokra, arcane archer / cleric that I just love. We all had miniatures made at Hero Forge and and all that kind of stuff. We're now excited. We're going to take a 2-week break, and we're going to jump into the next thing we're going to play is Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and we're going to do a Warhammer campaign in the southern reaches of what would be Europe on the map for Warhammer. The cool thing about Warhammer Fantasy is the world map is our world map. It's just all the fantasy stuff that goes with Warhammer.
Nice.
So we're going to be down in the southern end. We're in the Tillian area, and we're a kind of like a mercenary group that's trying to create a trade route across.
And that's a new system, right? The fantasy.
Yeah, well, it's 4th edition. We're playing the 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but they have editions 1 through 5 at this point. So
is it a D20 based or is it?
It is percentage based.
Okay.
And it has exploding dice for damage. Really cool, different mechanics from Dungeons and Dragons a little bit because it's lots of careers, and then you have an advanced career. You advance through those. You only play either humans, elves, halflings, or dwarves, but humans are the most prominent. Those are, I think, the highlights of it. The artwork is great. If you ever get a book, get the artwork and take a look at them. And they don't have really classes. They're more like careers of a job you did in between or before the adventuring that you're going on. So you might have been, just a boat pilot, or you might have just been a rat catcher. You might have just been a lawyer. You might have been, my guy's a duelist. So his job, he gets paid by rich nobles to fight the duels that they get themselves into with other nobles, and they can pay a duelist to be the fighter for that. So that's what my career was for my guy. And I was like, oh, this sounds good. Totally randomly rolled. When you create your character, it starts out with a random roll to be what your career is. If you don't want that career, this is an interesting mechanic, you could take experience points to help level up and roll again, or you can have less points. So if I don't roll and I just take the random one, I get like 200 XP points to level my guy up. If I didn't like that, I'm like, no, I don't want to be a duelist. I could say roll again, but I'm only going to get 100 XP to level my guy up. If I still didn't like it, roll another time, I get no XP to update him, but I can try to get a third roll, or I can just pick something from the list. So
well, that's awesome. I'm curious to hear more in the future. So I don't know much about Warhammer other than the big like battle system that it is, not the roleplay aspect. But yeah, some of my players in my DCC game are big miniature guys, and they have like they're like, oh yeah, well you could get it. They're like, Jordan, you could get an easy like 800 point army for like this, and I was like, oh, I'm good. I think I don't know if I need another hobby right now.
A whole nother investment.
Like that's a lot, but yeah, my Planegea game, my players decided to attack a red dragon when they shouldn't have, thinking themselves unstoppable because they found a potion of fire resistance. But after the first breath attack, they realized they were like, we're not, this is not good. So they have a magic item that teleports them to Nod, which is kind of the Feywild Shadowfell equivalent. And they went to the realm of nightmares, which is the Shadowfell equivalent. And now they realized that their enemy, who is the Queen of Spiders, is sitting on the throne of nightmares, and they have to figure out a way of getting her off of the throne of nightmares. So the original Queen of Night and Magic can sit back on it, and they can save Nod, and then also save their bear god, who is currently being poisoned by like evil drow, which is why they went on this whole thing. It's a whole long story, but I'm having a lot of fun with that. And tomorrow we're going to they bypassed the first gate to get to the Throne of Nightmares. So tomorrow they're going to have to get through the second gate, and then through the second gate they'll get to the Throne of Nightmares. And that's when the big finale is going to happen. And we're going to have to figure out, but I've been very clear that I'm like, you guys can't fight Lolth. You can't fight a god through traditional means. So I want you to come up with like a creative solution to this that isn't just like attacking. And they all kind of like, oh, like everyone's like,
you need trickery.
Okay. So now they're trying to figure out a way of tricking her off. And I was like, she is the god of like tricks and, you know, mischief and things like that. Like you gotta be pretty on your toes, but if you can figure it out. And so I am really curious what they're going to come up with. And I'm leaving it very open-ended. I'm just like, I don't know. Like, that dragon was going to just destroy them. They got real overconfident. I don't know why. Like, I think, well, what happened is they plowed over the monster that I had them fight. They like demolished it instantly. And so they felt invincible, and they knew that they snuck past a bunch of red dragons. So they just went out looking for a fight, and like they run out and they're like, oh yeah, let's go find the nearest red dragon. And I'm like, okay. It was fun times. So, but yeah, that game's going to come to an end, and I'm going to have a conversation with them whether we want to do a Historica Arcanum game, which is, that's up on my list of things to do. Either City of the Crescent, or I just got Era of the Crusades in the mail, and that would be really fun. They have another Kickstarter going on right now that you can check out. And then, or something different. Like, I don't know, maybe we'll just take a night and play Alice is Missing or something, and then figure out from there. But
yeah, that Historica Arcanum looked really good.
It's very good. It's so good. They sent me the second box set, which is one of the, I'm gonna do an unboxing video here on the main channel shortly. But like the art, the layout, like it's
yeah, the art is fantastic. So I got a couple of cloth maps in them.
Yep.
Of Jerusalem and
Cairo.
And Cairo, and they look really good.
Yep, super fun. Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening. That is our show. Lucian, thank you again for hanging out and coming by to see us. It was good to see you again and chat, and hopefully you'll be back in the future if you so desire. You guys, this show is sponsored by you, the people. So if you want to become a member of the YouTube channel, you certainly can to help us keep the show going. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/Jordan with a PH in the middle. And with that, I will be back next week with some more D&D news and various talks of gamer things and what have you. And we will see you all in the next episode. So take care.